this evening with some friends of mine to tell you about a project that we've called the First Lake Total System Watershed Management Project, Phase 1. That's a bit of a mouthful, and we've called it TSWM for obvious reasons. And over the course of the next hour and a half or so, we hope to give you some sense of what TSWM is all about, and give you some idea of what we've been doing within the last year or so within the First Lake Watershed, and also tell you about what we hope to do in the near future. And we've got a number of speakers here this evening, and we're going to end the session off with a question and answer period and an open discussion. Also attached to the agenda is a couple of maps. There's one that shows the First Lake Watershed, and another that shows the test and control areas in which we conducted our sampling program last summer. And I'll explain those in more detail as we go through the presentation. The watershed is the area of land which drains to a common point. And in the case of First Lake, all of that land drains through First Lake and leaves First Lake at Sucker Brook. The area of the watershed at First Lake is about 900 acres. Most of that land is developed, primarily a single-family residential. There's some semi-detached development. There's some commercial development like the town center. There is considerable institutional development, that is schools and the TASA Center, and there's a couple of arenas, of course. And there is considerable recreational land as well. The only portion of the watershed that is essentially undeveloped is at the east end of First Lake Drive, beyond Quincy. Other than that, the watershed is basically fully developed. The population of the watershed is about 6,000. About 6,000 people. Just to give you some idea of scale, the distance from the upper end of First Lake to the lower end is about 2 kilometers. The boundary, again, is a definition of a community, of a watershed community. In this particular case, this watershed again drains through Sucker Brook. It goes into Rocky Lake. It goes into the Shubenacadie system and heads north and discharges into the ocean, into the Bay of Fundy. Interestingly enough, this side of the boundary is also the provincial divide. So the rain that falls outside of that boundary flows toward the Little Sackville River, flows into the main Sackville River, goes to Bedford Basin, and discharges into the ocean some 60 miles distant from the rain that falls just a little bit to the north of the line. So that point or that line is the provincial divide. Why are we studying First Lake? First Lake really is not in a very bad condition. It's in fact in better condition than many lakes whose watershed is developed. In 1988, during the municipal elections, your current councillor in District 20, Don Blutner, was running for office, and the one comment that he heard over and over again from the people that lived in the area was the fact that they were concerned about First Lake. They were concerned about the water in the lake and about the future of the lake. They were concerned that the beach was being closed from time to time, and they wanted it made clear to their elected officials that they needed some help to protect that lake for future generations. And it was through the efforts of Councillor Blutner. This is the test area on Crimson, the control area on First Lake Drive. It's similar in terms of the amount of impervious surface and the drainage characteristics of the land. It's similar in terms of soil type and land use. And the other important criteria that we had to consider when selecting those areas in the watershed was that we had to have an area that was drained through one storm sewer so that we could sample at the outfall. And there is an outfall at this location, at the foot of Crimson. We conducted sampling, testing programs here, and also sampling the storm outfall at this location in the control area. The other important component, of course, and we didn't necessarily realize until we got into the project somewhat, is that we needed to have committed people. And we were fortunate to have that in both those areas. We had people from the test and the control area that not only implemented the necessary stewardship practices, but in addition to that, they were sampling with raw lugs at different hours of the night in rainfall conditions. And without that kind of attitude, we simply could not have carried the project off. So that's a little bit of a introduction and background, I guess, to the thing. And I now want to call on David Reed.
Okay. Now, people are talking about stewardship and stewardship practices, and I'd like to address the word stewardship just for a moment and what it means. To be a steward, or to implement stewardship, is to take diligent care and to think through everything we do, perform, okay, or exert on our environment. We have a responsibility to think through the practices that we use. We are all stewards of our very own environment. Stewards of the soil we stand on, stewards of the water that ends up in our lake. This project and implementing the stewardship practices was an attempt to manipulate, alter, condition, okay, simply change how we are doing things. We are doing certain things on our properties and around our homes already. And all we're asking is that we think these through and just change and alter something that's already existing. That's basically where we were driving at. We had two areas, the control area, and I'd like to thank the residents of the control area very much. We sort of left them in the dark, but it was a necessary evil. We wanted the control area to do what they normally do. Cut the grass the way they normally cut the grass. Fertilize the way they normally fertilize. Okay, apply soil amendments, okay, and potential applications the way they normally do. Okay, wash your car as often as you like. Walk your dog the way you normally walk your dog. We needed to establish a baseline of what is typically happening on average. And then we had our test areas. And these residents, with a lot of help, a lot of support, and a lot of effort on their own parts and within each other, and talking to each other, and working with each other, okay, implemented the stewardship practices. Okay, what were the stewardship practices? What did we do? This is what we did. Okay, it is a basket. Okay, there's a whole bunch of little things. First, we wanted to keep the curbs clean of silt, okay, debris, vegetative matter, okay, potential fertilizer spills, okay, anything, fecal coliform, pet manure, things of that nature, things that could be exported into that sewer directly on rainfall, okay, into the storm runoff sewer and directly into the lake. So we had to keep the curbs clean. Curb maintenance was one of the stewardship practices. Meaning when you cut your lawn on Saturday, okay, the property doesn't stop at the curb. Okay, you go along with your weed eater and your trimmer and you're spilling a very, very rich source of organic matter clippings into the curb, which is being exported into that sewer, okay, and is being exported out into the lake. A very, very potential nutrient source, okay, negatively impacting on your lake. After you do that, you've got to stop and clean it up, sweep it up. What did we do with excess vegetative matter? Well, another practice, another of the cultural practices we used was backyard composting. Okay, we wanted to provide each resident with a place they could go, somewhere that they could use a composter to take excess leaves, excess grass clippings, any excess vegetative matter off the property, okay, into the composter, into a controllable, manageable unit at the back, okay, not at the front sitting next to the curb, at the back. The end result being to recycle all of your yard waste on site, okay, effectively control, and at the end provide you with a net benefit, okay, which is a sustainable organic fertilizer which you use in your own beds or on your own lawns. So we got control of the excess vegetative matter with the backyard composting. Okay, we coached the residents after finding out how many pets were on the street. We did an initial survey, and 98% of the residents on the survey said that there was a problem with pet manure in their neighborhood. Okay, either it was their own, their neighbors, transient dogs being walked through the neighborhood, and you know they can do their little job on the front yard, and the homeowner walks away. Okay, leaving it there, a little present for you. Okay, they all complain that this is a problem. A very prevalent one at 98% on a survey. Okay, so we had to get and deal with the pet manure. So the idea was to be diligent, to pick up after our own pets. Okay, when we walk our pets, to take the proper equipment with us, some plastic bags to pick up that pet manure. Okay, to get it off the property. When is most important? The practical approach is if it's going to rain tomorrow, get it up today. You don't necessarily have to go out every night. But if it's going to rain, and we're expecting a big rain, as Ron will show you, there's things called impacts, flux. Okay, we need to get it off. It's going to rain tomorrow. You go out and you pick it up now. Okay, and we can get it off. That's a very, very sensitive time. Waiting until after it rains, we've got that export. Okay, onto the street, into the drain, out to the lake. So we've got to get it up. And timing, you can use to your advantage. Disposal of the pet manure. 2 ways to dispose that we suggested. One was in your regular garbage going to the landfill, okay, or a sanitary sewer. A sanitary sewer is not the storm grate in front of the house or along the curb. A sanitary sewer is your toilet. Okay, it's a different system entirely for treated sewage. Okay, that's what you want to do with it. They don't recommend that you compost cat feces and dog feces because of bacterial parasites and certain pathogens that we can't be sure that we're going to gain control of in backyard composting. So it's not a recommended practice. So our other options are to dispose of it effectively, either in landfill, it seems, okay, or in a sanitary sewer, and we asked the residents to try that. We also used and prescribed the use of zero phosphorus fertilizers. This was done after, and only after, intense assessment of these properties. Grass species, weed population and types, okay, soil profiles, compaction levels, deep thatch levels, okay. All of this was analyzed. All of these random soil samples on each and every individual property were sent to a lab for scientific analysis, and upon receipt of the results, okay, these results, each homeowner was given a personal profile of their exact property with recommendations and comments for future development. This was coupled with a complete explanation, okay, on basic soil fertility, audits and recommendations about how things like organic matter, pH, lime, base saturation, cation exchange capacity, these are all very technical words, but each and every resident was given this information so that they could better understand exactly what was going on below their feet, because we were about to take the phosphorus away from them. But we did it from a position of knowledge and understanding. After scientific analysis, there was only 2 properties that actually required phosphorus. The phosphorus of that, I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Lopes, who's going to review the actual results of the water quality with you now.
My job was to measure the effect of your efforts, your efforts as residents of the test area and the control area. And actually the monitoring itself was captained by Richard Van Ingen, who was the project coordinator and who is here tonight. And he was supported, as John Shepard said, by many of you residents, and lots of you saw midnight downpours on First Lake Drive, and I did too. Well, we took water samples at those 2 storm outfalls, at the bottom of the test area and the bottom of the control area, just as the water was headed into the lake. We did some sampling in dry weather, but most of those samples were taken in rains. We wanted to see the wash off the area. The flow was measured in the pipe. Now those pipes flow in dry weather too. I'll be speaking about dry weather fluxes in a few minutes. But they flow. We measured the flow, dry weather and wet weather, and we took samples for the bacteria and for the phosphorus, and then had them analyzed at the Path Lab. We're talking about millions of bacteria per hectare over the duration of the study, the 7 months. So this is 1,000 million, which is a billion. And over here is the control area and the test area. And there's different hatchings for light rain, heavy rain, or dry weather, light rain, and heavy rain. Turns out that the dry weather and light rain were insignificant. You can't pick them out. As I said before, the bacteria moved to the lake in a rush in heavy rain. Now we looked at all the heavy rains in the 7 months, and to them we attributed the flux of bacteria which we had measured in the 2 heavy rain storms that we experienced. So this is a built-up result. The result is that this estimate shows that about 7 times as many bacteria were coming to the lake per hectare of area, 7 times as many from the control area as the test area. So this is in terms of flux instead of concentration, but the result is similar. So one more time, this is your effectiveness. Those of you on Crimson, your diligence with pet feces, because that's the major source here. The other sources might be raccoons and so forth, over which we have no control. But your work, your diligence with pet feces, gave you brought your export of bacteria to 1/7. I think that's really quite commendable, and I think that would help the lake if we could achieve those kinds of results on a lake scale. Okay, now I'm going to move to phosphorus, and I have to find it. This is the same presentation. These are grams per hectare of phosphorus from 0 up to 250. The clear areas are dry weather, and then there's the light hatch, which is for light rain, and the heavy hatching is for heavy rain. Now this is an apparent paradox. Look at this. This puzzled us for a while, and it was a surprise. Here we are on the test area, which through the cooperation of everybody concerned received virtually no phosphorus in the 1993 season, and yet in dry weather its phosphorus export to the lake is 3 times as large as that from the control area. How could that be? It's an apparent paradox. We can't answer that conclusively. We don't know for sure. There was one other piece of evidence, though, which David provided you a moment ago. The soil tests on the test area showed that the phosphorus levels were unusually high. Now, it's the suggestion or the working hypothesis that we hold at the moment is that for some reason the phosphorus levels, because the phosphorus levels have built up to be unusually high on the test area, and we did some measurements to suggest that they're higher on the test area than on the control area, that phosphorus is leaching into the lake via the groundwater. The groundwater is what flows on the dry days. And so those high phosphorus soils are yielding phosphorus to the groundwater on the dry days. There's more dry days than rainy days, and so the counter keeps ticking of phosphorus toward the lake, and this total outranks that total. We interpret the whole bar, though, as hopeful in this sense that if we find it possible, if we together find it possible to keep this low phosphorus program for 94 and maybe a year or two beyond this, at least, beyond that too, really, this phosphorus reservoir ought to decay and be gone, or at least be reduced in a few years. And in time, this bar, we suggest, will only be about half as high from the test area as from the control area. And we think that through your efforts, you can achieve a 50% reduction in phosphorus. So that again, I think, is admirable, and it's to your credit. To sum up, then, this project has 2 thrusts, but one of them is that you, as a resident of this watershed, have influence on the quality of your lake water. And you have influence on your lake water quality from your actions in your own backyard and your front yard too. But this is really kind of, incredible that through actions in your own yard, you are able to improve that lake water quality. The other thrust in this project is to generate jobs for Nova Scotians through these kinds of activities and to export this technology.
Now, I was very encouraged by this project because there is a problem with First Lake, but the bigger problem is what we can do about environmental degradation, about problems we have. There's so many problems in this world that we just sort of pass off, let the government handle it, we can't do anything about it. But as far as I'm concerned, concern with the environment starts in our own backyard. We all have a responsibility. Now, throughout this whole project, I've seen so much hope from the test area, the Crimson Drive residents, people like Philip Cox and the rest of them. The First Lake area, he was the first chap I visited. I don't know his name. I asked John at the end of the street. We were out there investigating where there's an outflow coming out just by his house. He came out with his kids and his dog. What are you doing? And we explained to him, and he was engaged. He wanted to do something about it. So that was very encouraging to me. Now, with respect to this project and what it has cost all of us, I'd like to thank CETA. Brad Hodgins is here, the province of Nova Scotia, who supported this project. Edmonds supported it, the county of Halifax, Dr. Lokes. I'd like to give special mention to Dr. Patriquin, our chief scientist, with TSOM, Total System Organic Management, and of course the chief scientist of this project, Dr. Lokes. There was a combination, and this is the way I think the future has to go in solving environmental problems. We can't afford the government to solve it. We can't afford end-of-pipe solutions. Just let them do it. To solve environmental problems, you have to deal with the source. That's the key. We all have a responsibility. And I think that's the key about this whole thing. And there was government, bureaucrats. John hates that name. But he's one of the special ones. You have academia, Dr. Patriquin, excellent. I see Greg Schramm here, a student, very dedicated to tests at the fire hall. And we have private sector ourselves, Dr. Lokes, and that's the way things have to happen in the future. So I think what we're in First Lake, without going into the science, I think this is a template in how not only future watershed management should go, but how we should solve environmental problems. We all have a vested interest, and we all have a responsibility. Now, our project has received national and international attention. I've had calls from Chesapeake Bay, which is Baltimore, Maryland, one of the biggest, most populated watersheds. They've got a problem, the same problem here, only much larger, with agricultural fertilizers, with pesticides, with stormwater runoff, with all types of problems. A little different because they have a heavy agricultural problem there. But they've called us. Robert Peace of Ontario, which are doing a huge watershed management study and video across Canada. They came to look at us. And he called me in January and said that we were one of his top 5 projects. He was very impressed. We weren't edited out, okay? And he was very impressed. And that video should be available soon. So we are getting national and international recognition. I would also at this time like to thank other people who've worked for years and years and years at improving lakes. Shalom Mandeville. He's back there. We take people like this for granted. Sometimes we have a problem, but he's made a very constructive contribution to this whole process. Now, you're asking, where do we go from here? And what does this mean? There should be a phase 2. We want to engage the whole watershed. And the dynamics to this is not only to improve this watershed, but to make an example so we can carry on to the city of lakes, which is Dartmouth. We have, Halifax, Dartmouth is one of the greatest concentrations of lakes. We are blessed with this asset, and we can't take it for granted. And I think we can create a template here and an example not only to carry on to our sister lakes and communities, but to carry on nationally and internationally. So I'll just end this up, because this has been a long night for you, and I appreciate you all being here. Power of one. And this is what I want you all to listen to. Not about the project, but I want you to listen to this, because this is how you can make a difference. 57 years ago, one man reached out to one small boy named Jose, and in so doing set the stage for literally millions of person-to-person partnerships around the globe. As the world has changed, we too have changed, evolving into ever more efficient and effective partnerships. Our strength has always been in our grassroots approach and in our respect for individuals and our commitment to a single goal. We have always believed strongly in the power of one vision, one hope, one direction toward a better world. This year, the road we take toward that brighter future will be a little different. Now that's the power of one. Often we think today with the problems we can't do anything about it, but you can here with First Lake. You can not only make a difference in your lake, you can set an example to other people. And it's about stewardship practices. It's about looking at your land and thinking about it, educating yourself. It's a living thing. It's not just inert. You don't pour anything on it. You have to think about it, analyze it. You've heard everything tonight. This is what this is about. It's about improving the environment. It's about engaging yourself and doing something about something that can improve your own quality of life, your children, and future generations. Thank you.
Open the floor now for questions and answers or any kind of open discussion that you please. There's a microphone, Shalom, you're going to set that up again. There's a microphone here in the middle, and we would like you to come to the microphone to speak when you do have questions. Perhaps you could each identify yourselves when you come forward.
Warren Irvine from Johnson Crescent on First Lake. I have a question for Ron Luce. Both questions relate to the same factor, I think, Ron. Okay. I noticed the control area had First Lake Drive go right through the middle of it, whereas Crimson is a cul-de-sac. I know some of the people around there walk their dogs, and they tend to come down one of the other streets and along First Lake Drive and then up one of the other streets, whereas I don't think they do that on Crimson, and so there'd be a difference in the number of pets crossing First Lake Drive area. And the other is, did you have a look at the traffic patterns too? The cars going along First Lake, there must be 10, 20 times more traffic there, and I'm wondering if organic matter from oil drips or whatever played a factor in any of your studies.
Thanks, Warren. On the second question, okay, well, we captured a little bit of First Lake Drive in the test area. Oh, there you are. Because that part of First Lake Drive is captured in the system, in the catch basins. Well, just a little bit. Okay, I really have to agree with you on both points, though. It is possible. Well, is it? It's possible. Okay. it's true that there would be more automobile emissions on the control area than on the test area. I mean, I'm sure it's true, as you suggest. And as for visiting walking dogs, I would acknowledge that what you suggest there is also possible. Yeah.
Just in defense of Crimson Drive, speaking to the residents and working with the residents closely, they felt that there was a considerable transient dog population going up to the cul-de-sac and entering the second lake watershed from the cul-de-sac. And they complained bitterly about it and about the lack of responsibility being exercised by these transient dog owners. So it could balance out.
My name is John Young, and I have a question also for Ron and also about sample purity. Did everybody in the test area cooperate? And was there any tendency in the control area for people to observe the good habits of their neighbors and adopt them?
Okay, on the second question, the answer is yes. We did detect in our post-project survey that some people in the control area had absorbed the stewardship practices and adopted them, thinking that they were helping the project and helping the lake. And now, we don't think there was too much of that, but certainly that was one. And we did detect a little bit of that. In future, we think we would go for, I think, what you call a blind control. Although I don't know. It seemed to me that people would pretty soon become aware, why you were making these midnight visits to the outfall. But it's difficult, and we were a little bit vulnerable to that. We don't think very much. Our post-survey didn't reveal much of that, but it's a possibility that we did experience some of it. Help me with your first question again, John, please.
Well, just the other way around. There's corruption on both sides.
Yes, of course. Okay, we had either 27 out of 28 participants on the test area, or 26 out of 28. I'm not exactly sure myself. I think maybe 26 out of 28 participating households.
Just a whimsical thought. You raised the question as whether there were particular circumstances of difference between the unknown differences between the two sites. The perfect experiment, if you could contrive it, of course, would be to reverse roles.
Yes, I understand that. However, I'd leave it to you to persuade Crimson to, okay? Just one thing. Well, I have this powerful instrument in front of me. We've focused our discussion on water quality and on bacteria and phosphorus. You realize that that's just phase one of TSWM. We go on to erosion prevention, and to avoidance of pesticides and herbicides, and to utilization of native species. This is just phase one. The other point is that you can, once you have this concept, and you do now, you've had it for 90 minutes, and some of you have had it for 9 months. There are other ways to look at this concept too, and to judge it in comparison with other techniques. Does it create other problems? And we think not. Is it cost effective? And we can discuss this privately, but by our analysis, it stacks up very well for cost effectiveness. Is it fair? And we think it is fair. We think that does it impact on, or does it impinge on other uses being made of the land and waters? And it doesn't. Anyway, we have a list of about 12 criteria. Once you've got a water quality improvement, then you look for all the side effects and whether they are positive or negative. And TSWM stands up very well for no negative side effects and side benefits, lots of them.
As well, if the residents of the control actually carried out some of the stewardship practices, and the results would have been contaminated in the favor of the project. I think that's safe to say. In other words, the results were better than were shown here tonight.
Walter Reagan, Sackville Rivers. As you mentioned before, we were a partner of the project. We're very excited over it, and we certainly hope you get phase 2. But the first lake is pretty well still water. Is it possible to export this technology to moving water, like a river?
Thank you, Walter. The answer is yes. The other part of the answer is that the lake is an easier place to start. And we're hoping for an early success because a first-time failure would finish us. This concept would stop right now. The advantage that a lake has is that if my watershed address is a lake, then I live with that water for about 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 3 months. If my watershed address is a stream, then that water that I may have insulted is out of sight in 10 minutes. That's the difference, and that's why we start with a lake. But lakes lead to streams, and streams lead to estuaries, and it works all the way through.
Robin Mullen, Ryan's Ridge Court. We've talked about a number of stewardship practices, many of which are pretty straightforward, but some of them seem to be a little more complicated, like the fertilizer side of things and aeration and those types of things. Is there any information that was given to the folks in the test area that's available to us generally that we could have a look at, some of the recommendations or approaches that we could put into practice right away without waiting for phase 2 or other types of things?
Well, we knew that somebody would ask that. We are in the process of preparing a manual for use in other watersheds. We're faced with a bit of a dilemma. One of the objectives of this project is to have some economic benefit. Well, gee whiz, how are we going to make any money if we give people this stuff without selling it? So that's a bit of a problem. But on the other hand, we want to share all the information. So we haven't quite come to grips with that paradox, I guess. But somehow we've got to resolve that. Now, what I just said applies to the whole of the project. Your question, I think, was asked more specifically with regard to lawn care practice. And I suggest that it might be appropriate if you were any of the other people here who are interested in getting specifics on the lawn care aspects, and you can call Edmonds Brothers. I'm sure that they would be more than willing to share that knowledge with individuals. Sure. Oh, I thought you had left the room.
No, sorry. In response to your question as well, yes, please leave your name and your number, and anybody else who is interested. I am quite willing to offer you the same information package that was offered to every resident, okay, on Crimson Drive. The only thing I can't couple it with is a specific soil analysis of your own property. Okay, but if you read that document closely, you'll be able to interpret exactly what you get back from the lab. Okay, it's that clear and it's that straightforward. And it also reviews certain cultural practices you can use, okay, to improve the quality of the turf and soil system below your very feet. And if you'd be happy, I would be happy to see that anybody who wants it gets it, or call the office with your name and your number, and we'll have it mailed out to you. And that's probably the way we'll handle it. But I mean, fair is fair. I mean, it's the same information. It's public knowledge. It's been distributed already. The manual is another case. But I'm not going to deprive you of the same information.
Any others? Shalom, you must have something to say.
Yes, I do. My name is Shalom Mandeville. I wanted to let everybody in Sackville know that this show will be shown on 4 cable stations, Dartmouth, Sackville, Mid-Valley, New Glasgow, and we are talking to 2 other stations in New Brunswick. And secondly, I have a friend in Crimson Crescent by the name of Ed Lilly. I didn't see him today, but he was quite excited in participating in this. And thirdly, if the second phase goes ahead, and if there's money, I would strongly suggest that First Lake at the 2 deep stations be sampled during the growing season, maybe weekly once at different depths, and mainly for phosphorus and chlorophyll A. And then the rest of the year, including the winter, once a month. And I recently saw some work from Ontario. I just brought it along with me. They've done that for 6 years, Dr. Dillon's group. and I'm sure, I don't know if Caracas will agree with this, but this is to obtain a good handle on the yearly phosphorus loading, because First Lake was never sampled to that extent, because CWRS's terms of reference weren't that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shalom.
Sure. Thank you, Shalom. Just a short addendum to your comments. We anticipated that Phase 2 will go. Richard Van Ingen and I, we have been doing minimal but some sampling of First Lake. You appreciate that in Phase 1 we really were at the runoff stage, not at the lake. But he and I anticipated that, you know, the whole watershed and the lake is the next stage. And so in the fall, we, especially at overturn time, we sampled the lake. At springtime last week, again tonight actually, as a backup sample, we've been taking these rather imprecise but still fairly useful spring turnover samples. And we appreciate the data from your society, Soil and Water Conservation Society. So we've taken some steps to laying a foundation for the lake this year.
I can be late for my hockey game, really.
Question for you, John.
Yes, sir.
Frank Sutherland. John, the question relates to the obstructions in the piping around your foundation drains and that type of thing in terms of material flowing into that open or into that pipe. How successful has the use been of various filter fabrics in relation to containing the movement of the soils?
That's the approach that I think is probably or represents the best potential in terms of solving the problem. I'm rather reluctant to just push forward with that solution without having some study done, because there is the potential for that filter fabric to become clogged and for that in itself to present a problem. So I think we've got to be careful about putting forth a solution that people would use within our community without being certain, I guess, that the solution is going to work. But that's the one solution at this point, I guess, that I'm moving forward with.
Yep. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Philip Cox. I had a question for David. David, we used a special fertilizer during the project this past year, and I just wondered if you found any suppliers that could supply that for the coming year if there is no Phase 2. I have never seen that in a store. It just showed up on our doorsteps, and I'm sure that's not going to happen this year. So I grew kind of attached to it. I'd like to know where and how much that stuff is.
Phil's talking about the fact that we put all of the residents in the test area on a nutrient budget. The budget was 2 pounds of natural organic nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per year and 1 pound of naturally occurring potash, 0 phosphorus. And that was all pre-weighed and delivered to each individual resident on a regular basis with how and what and when to do what with what. We looked after them very well. And I agree, there is a problem with finding natural, organic, 0 phosphorus fertilizers. Okay, it is a juxtaposition. Most natural organic fertilizers tend to be high in phosphorus. It's a natural byproduct. There is a product called Sustain. I'm not going to get up here and suggest brand names and flog products. All I'm saying is that there's a product out there called Sustain, which is a 524. I like the numbers on it. I like the fact that it's natural organic. There is problems with its rate of release. Okay, so there's initial high nitrogen flush from that product, but it's one of the better products on the market. We used something from a company in Montreal, from EcoVal, which was a feather meal, poultry-based, 10-0-0. That's why we added the potash supplement to it. I agree, they are more expensive. They are more difficult to find. Okay, we have heightened the consciousness of our suppliers to our specific needs and what our future needs will be. And we've reiterated to Maritime Turf, who supplied originally the feather meal for us, okay, and other natural organic fertilizer suppliers, that we need these types of products. This is where the future is going. Okay, we need ecologically sound, well thought out products for use in watersheds, and there's a hole there. That's future vision. That's job creation. That's product development servicing a need. And it's something we're going to have to consider. Yes, we've made some phone calls to Farmer Clem. If you go to your garden centers and start asking for these products, they will start to stock them. But me as a professional in this industry calling up saying you should carry this because, I mean, that's not going to get through to their marketing department. You actually going and saying, listen, this is what I need. I've seen it somewhere else. I'm willing to pay $4, $5 more because that's what it's going to amount to. Okay, they're higher quality, more expensive fertilizers. Unfortunately, at the moment. In the future, with increased demand, okay, and when increased availability, as science and technology applies themselves to the natural organic framework, we'll have the products that we can use effectively, efficiently, and at a cost-competitive price. So I don't know if I've really answered your question. Anybody who's specifically interested, I'm still trying to work on finding a cheap, available source that is worthwhile. I haven't answered it yet. These other products are available. They just happen to be a little bit more expensive. It's a choice. If you were applying 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 in the past, and we're telling you to apply 2 of natural, weigh it out. See how much you're spending. Take a look. Reconsider. Think it through.
I'd like to make a comment on this. I remember in the early 70s when eutrophication was a problem, the soap manufacturer said that it's impossible to produce a detergent without phosphates. And now you go to a store, you see nothing but phosphate-free detergent. So we have to ask for it, and time will show that maybe 10 years from now we have nothing but phosphate-free fertilizer.
Science and research is catching up, but they need more time. We used to say, make it green, make it lush, make it now, make it cheap. Okay, and all of a sudden, there's been a shift. There's been a polar shift in what we're asking for, and the science hasn't caught up yet. It will, every day. There's more and more coming out.
Curtis McKinney, Chandler Drive. Has your testing done anything to help homeowners determine if the swimming is safe in First Lake, particularly after heavy rainfalls and what have you? Is there some testing being done by other sources as well that we have access to on a regular basis?
Yes, the Department of Health, Nova Scotia Department of Health, tests First Lake weekly in the swimming season, and I think I'm fair in saying that especially after a heavy rain.
But you're talking of the beach areas.
The beach areas.
But what about the lake?
I see. Okay, then I know of no sampling except in 1989 when Tons did their sampling. They I think they did lake sampling for coliforms, but no. Now, however, if Department of Health closed the Kinfin Beach, then you might reconsider your swimming place too.
Such a wide area.
Pardon me?
It's not a wide. You have a lot higher percentage of people down at the beach. The rest of the lake is not that population.
I see.
It's not considered.
Yeah. Well, in support of what you say, it turns out that beach also is close to many runoff sources. So that what you're saying, and I can understand too, is that just because Kinsman is showing high levels does not mean that other areas far from there in the lake are showing high levels. So I don't know how you can supply that service for yourself except to take your own samples to the path lab.
Well, in 1990, when I was just wanted to throw some extra information out here. When I was the so-called chairman of Sackville Rivers Advisory Board, I had requested Public Health to do the testing offshore Sackavah Canoe Club because the chairman had approached me. And Public Health sampled it for about 6 months. And I have a letter from the Honorable Minister, ex-Honorable Minister, saying that there were no problems. I have a letter, I'll send it to John Shepherd.
My name is Teresa Scratch, and I actually live on the ridge that separates First and Second Lake. They're watersheds. I would like to applaud the group on the work that they've done. The interest is obviously great. I've been hearing about it for some time, and the numbers that have turned out tonight are quite impressive. I am, however, disappointed that this information might not be shared with other watersheds. I believe it could be a benefit, particularly to the neighboring watershed of Second Lake. Part of it might be prudent to encourage Second Lake watershed residents with regard to the dog feces. Because those watersheds are neighboring, their habits will reflect on First Lake watershed itself because of the movement of residents between the two watersheds. Congratulations again, and I do hope stage 2 is a go.
I didn't mean to imply that we would not share information. What I perhaps should have said is that we need to determine the mechanism by which we're going to share it. Any others, please?
Lewis Wicks, Crimson Drive. John, I have a question as to why I had the privilege of walking around the lake yesterday, and as John Edmonds was saying, Phase 2 is going to involve erosion and runoff into the lake, completely around the lake. We now have the parkland around the lake, and it seems to me we're going through a process this spring of cutting the trees down, shredding them, spreading them on paths, that some of which, from me to that wall, they're closer than that to the lake. If all the branches are being shredded, aren't we sort of defeating the purpose of what we tried to do last year? We're now taking all the green material, pumping it into the lake right now. And this is going on. If you, if you leave here now and just walk the paths around the lake, you'll see the shredded branches. They're just on the pathways, within 2-3 feet of the lake. That's got to run in there, and I'm sure it's putting in there exactly what we tried to keep out on Crimson Drive last summer, which was the grass and the clippings and that type of thing. And seeing we have council here who's supporting it, it seems to me council would also be paying for the municipality to cut down these trees and pump it right back into the lake.
I think you're referring to the area opposite the Sackville Town Center? Is that?
No, actually it's going from right where the roadway goes in off of Glendale all the way around to the old arena on First Lake Drive. They're cutting trees down and clearing the land. Well, I'm not sure how much up further than that, but once you leave the pathways, I was just walking the pathways where they're shredding it and actually sprinkling it on the pathways.
I wasn't aware of that personally, but again, the answer, of course, is education.
Well, this is the same council that gave us the funds last year to do Project 1 that has to be paying for this somewhere.
The challenge will be to educate people as to the impacts of those kinds of activities. And it's a tremendous challenge, even within an organization such as the County of Halifax. The challenge is not only education, but how to get that information out to people and get it out effectively so they can use it. But I will check into that particular one. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming here this evening. We certainly appreciate it.